So, I've been traveling the world for the past couple of years, and my biggest takeaway from my travels thus far has been that nothing is normal. Normal does not exist. And oftentimes we don't realize that until we go somewhere else that's different and then come back to where we started so that we can compare it to what we've experienced. That said, in this video, we will be reacting to Americans realizing just how abnormal, or dare I say, strange, the USA is after living abroad. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this first video.
So I've been living in Japan for 15 years, and this is my reverse culture shock when coming back to the States. The first thing is coming back with a baby. I get a lot more judgmental looks from other people. In Japan, everybody is more loving towards kids in general, and if a baby cries, then they'll just say, oh, so poor thing, oh. But in the States, they look at me like I'm a bad mom. Like, all I did this morning was go to the buffet so I could get my food, and I left her with her grandmother at the table, and she had a temper tantrum because I left. There's separation anxiety, and everybody's staring at her. And she cried so hard just because I left for like.
So I think what this really comes down to is not even how Americans see children, it's how Americans see people relative to themselves. It's no secret at this point, especially if you're from another country. It's a secret to a lot of Americans, but for people from other places, it's no secret that Americans tend to be a little bit self-absorbed and even bordering on narcissistic more often than not. And of course, this is in large part due to America's culture of individualism. So when people see a baby crying, they don't think in terms of, oh, it's a baby, babies cry, that's what they do. Instead, they think in terms of, oh, this crying baby is interrupting my dinner. Now, to be fair, I think that in most cultures, when a child, or let's say a pet, is creating a general disturbance, to the extent that everyone within that immediate vicinity can no longer engage in a regular conversation, that's when it doesn't really matter where you are. People are going to feel some type of way about it. Now, whether they vocalize that or express that to you is a whole different thing. Perhaps it could also be that in Japanese culture, and I've never really traveled through Japan. I was there very, very briefly, maybe an hour and a half or less on a layover. But from everything I've heard about Japanese culture, Japanese people are not particularly confrontational or direct. And I've kind of found this to be the case in at least the two Asian countries I've been to thus far, Thailand and now Vietnam. People don't seem to be very confrontational or assertive in social settings. So it could also be a bit of that as well. But I don't know, let me know how people perceive crying babies where you're from in the comments below.
Like 1 minute that another mom came over me to comfort me and tell me that I'm doing a good job as being a mom. Whereas in Japan, everybody would maybe look and say, oh, poor thing, oh, and instead of being like, oh, you're such a terrible mom because your baby's crying your head off. In general, there's more of a love for kids in Japan than in the States.
But I'm struggling to see why anyone would ever think that someone is a bad mother because their child is crying. Because again, that's what children do. That's like saying you're a bad pet owner because your dog is barking or your cat is meowing. That's what they do. It's literally part of the package. So, I don't know. Again, maybe it's different in different cultures, but I never really found that to be the case even in the US. But maybe my experience is different because, well, I don't have children.
I feel. Yeah. And the other thing I need to get used to is the amount of small talk that I have to make. Because in Japan, like when you're in an elevator, you don't really have to say anything. It just can be quiet and everyone's comfortable with that.
So this right here is one thing. So as you can see, well, I don't know if you can actually see out of the window, but I'm in a high-rise apartment here in Vietnam. We're on the 19th floor. So those elevator rides are a lot longer than they were in Thailand. So it's pretty much a daily occurrence that I'm going to be in the elevator for at least 30-ish seconds with a complete stranger. And something I've realized is that elevator talk does not exist here. And as an introvert, I really, really enjoy that. I really love the fact that you can be in an elevator with somebody or a group of people and no one feels obligated to say anything. In fact, people kind of occupy the furthest possible corner they can, and oftentimes they don't even look at each other. And you don't have to say, have a good evening, or hey, how's it going? You don't have to say any of that. The pleasantries just aren't a social obligation here. And that's part of the reason why I don't even know that I want to leave Vietnam, because I just really like that. And I think, again, in a lot of Asian cultures, that's also the case. It's also the case in the Nordic countries, from what I've heard, but definitely a lot different than the US, where you're almost seen as strange if you don't say something.
But in America, nobody's comfortable with silence. You always have to be talking about something, and it can be anything.
No one's comfortable with silence until your baby starts crying, apparently.
And then that's it. You're friends for like the 10 seconds you're together in the elevator, and then you're done. Even the taxi drivers in Japan, you don't need to say anything. It's just sort of this accepted silence between each other, unless the taxi driver is feeling especially friendly. But most of the time, it's just quiet. Whereas in the States,
I think part of that is also the language barrier. Because in Japan, generally, they just speak Japanese. They don't really speak English. So once they clock that you're a foreigner, they might not try to talk to you because maybe they don't even speak the language. But that is a distinct difference I've noticed as well, is that when I'm in a Grab, which is basically our equivalent of Uber or Lyft here in Southeast Asia, I never really talk to the driver other than a thank you at the end of the drive. And it's perfectly fine.
if you're riding with an Uber or a Lyft, it's expected that you make small talk. Otherwise, you probably will get a bad review as a customer. And the last thing that I need to get used to, which is totally new, is the amount of inflation that's happening in the States. It's crazy. Like, you can spend easily $200 just doing your normal everyday shopping. And this doesn't even have to be at a Whole Foods anymore. That used to be the case, but now it's just like your everyday grocery store, and you just need to buy basic things, and it's easily $200 just for maybe a few days worth of groceries.
It's crazy. It is absolutely crazy. And the thing that people don't understand about inflation and how I see inflation compared to most people is that most people, when they think about inflation in the US, they're thinking about it relative to how it used to be. The way I see inflation, or the overall cost of living in the US, is if I wanted a lifestyle that was similar to what I get in Europe, or let's say living in a high-rise here in Vietnam, which is not even a fair comparison. So let's just say if I wanted a lifestyle similar to what I had in the Netherlands, how much would that cost me? To get the same quality of food, I have to go to Sprouts or Whole Foods Market. Those are two very expensive grocery stores, maybe Trader Joe's or somewhere like that, also pretty expensive. In order to have access to public transit and cycling infrastructure, I have to live in New York. I have to live in maybe San Francisco, Washington, D.C., somewhere like that. Boston, very high cost of living city. In other words, to get the European experience in the U.S. is categorically more expensive. It's laughably more expensive, to the extent that you basically have to be rich to live like your average European does. That's why America is a scam, in my opinion.
It's nuts. I mean, like I was saying before, I have to pay at least $7 for a coffee that doesn't even taste that good. Whereas in Japan, I paid it like the equivalent of $4 for a coffee that tastes amazing, and it's a bigger size. And lunches and dinners are a lot more money, and then you have to add the tip on top of that. And I think now 15% is seen as like a lower side tip, and they don't like that as much.
That was always seen as a lower side tip. As far as I can remember, I've been alive 25 years, it was always 20%. That was always the standard. And anything below that would elicit a very negative response from the servers when they went into the back room. I say this as someone who used to work at a restaurant.
And in Japan, I don't have to tip at all. And the lunch will cost you maybe like $6 for this big thing that is very filling and satisfying. So every time I come back to the States, I have this reverse culture shock that I need to readjust to. And those are just a few of the things.
Yeah, honestly, I'm at a point, if you can't tell from this video or my other videos, where I don't even feel compelled to go back to the States, not even to visit at this point. There's nothing that I really want to see over there. I saw pretty much everything I wanted to see on this road trip that we took, maybe some of the national parks, but I don't really feel any sort of magnetism from the US despite having lived there for the first, 23, 24 years of my life. It's crazy. On to the next video. And this one is muted because copyright, but I think you kind of get the idea just with the video itself, because we have just guns on open display right here. We have guns and we have these animals. This looks like one of those sporting goods stores with an emphasis on hunting. This is, I don't know how common exactly this is in the US because I do not frequent stores like this. I'm vegan. I don't even hunt. I have no reason to ever want a gun for any sort of purpose at all, especially a gun like this. But the fact that you can just go into a store and just buy a gun, that is pretty jarring. That is pretty jarring. And I will say, it was in the back of my mind, being in the US, that somebody could just get a gun and shoot me and my girlfriend, and there's really nothing I could do about it. And people could say, oh, well, you should just get a gun as well to defend yourself. If I'm thinking in terms of getting into gun battles and having to train for that, maybe I'm not in a developed nation. I don't know. That's just me personally, because here in Vietnam, I never have to think about that. When I was in Thailand, I never had to think about that. The Netherlands, I never had to think about that. I never had to think about that anywhere else other than the US. So I don't know what it is about the US that makes people so incredibly dense when it comes to gun control. But a large swath of the population, an embarrassingly large swath of the population, thinks that it is perfectly acceptable for your average person to have access to a gun. And I just don't, for the life of me, understand it. Now, some people are into hunting, or maybe they like going to the shooting range for target practice. I'm not here to judge your hobbies. Personally, I'm not into those things. But, I mean, hey, I'm into bodybuilding. Some people think bodybuilding's weird. I don't care. That's just what I'm into. So to each their own in that regard, but they at least need to make it incredibly difficult for people to have guns. And I remember I actually did an essay in college about what I thought the solution was to the mass shooting issue in the US, which was that I suggested that everyone should only have access to one gun. I think that this right here might be a fair compromise that people on both sides could buy into, is that you only have access to one gun, because I think at the time I saw a statistic that the vast majority of mass shooters had multiple guns on them at the time. So that can mitigate damage. And also another thing I would add to that is, and I know it probably sounds crazy that I'm even trying to negotiate or find any sort of middle ground here, because guns really should not be accessible to the average person. And I get that, I agree. But if we're actually looking for a practical, applicable solution, I think that everyone should only have access to one gun, and you should have to store that gun at an actual firing range or some sort of community vault or something like that, where you don't just have a gun in your home. I think that guns have no place in homes, in schools, so on and so forth. But I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments. On to the next video.
I've been living in Italy for about 2.5 years now, but I am currently visiting home in the US, and reverse culture shocks are so real. So first, obviously, I'm back in summer and I'm in Florida, so it is incredibly hot. I definitely love AC, but the AC that grocery stores and other stores, movie theaters, blast during the summer is unreal. I mean, that would never happen in Italy, and I honestly forgot what a huge difference it is going from super hot, humid outside to freezing indoors. A lot of Italians are anti-AC, but I would say the AC that my mom uses at her house.
So that's something I didn't really know. I've never been to Italy, by the way. I only really went to the Netherlands and a few countries surrounding it. I didn't know that Italians were anti-AC. If you're Italian, or if you know about Italians or Italy in general, let me know why that's the case in the comments. Because my girlfriend, she did her internship in Valencia, Spain, and she didn't have AC in her apartment, and it definitely seemed to bother her quite a bit. And she's from the Netherlands. She didn't grow up with AC. So even she was a little bit dumbfounded at the fact that a climate like that would not essentially come with AC by default. That confused me as well. So obviously people spend more of their time outdoors and they open their windows, things of that nature. But I feel like in Spain and Italy, out of anywhere in Europe, those are the two places I can think of where it makes the most sense for most people to have AC. But again, if you're from one of those places and you don't have AC, let me know in the comments why you choose not to have AC. Because I get it for Germany, I get it for Norway or the Netherlands. I'm struggling to grasp that for Spain and Italy. But again, I'm open to hearing your explanation.
I would say is perfect. It's not too cold, but you're also not going to be sweating in your own house. So love AC, but also it can be a bit too much in the US. People here are so chatty, especially where I'm at. I'm around Jacksonville, so really close to Georgia and just like the South in general. People here are so chatty, and it's not really like that in Italy. Depends where you are, but I will be in a store shopping, minding my own business, and someone will come up to me and ask for my opinion on something they want to buy for their son or their daughter or someone in their family, or someone will just randomly start talking to me. Or when you go into stores here and you order something, people ask, "How are you? How's your day? What are you up to today?" I'm like, oh my God. Like,
So just from the perspective of someone who used to work in retail, who spent a considerable amount of time at the cash register, I hated that so much. I hated it. I don't like it as a customer, and I especially hated it as a worker, having to greet people. And there were literal times, literal shifts, where my manager would either put me at the front of the store or somewhere near the front of the store, they called it the front zone, and have me greet people as they walked in. And I hated it so much. That is something I never encountered in Europe, thankfully, because it makes no sense. Why do you need to be greeted at the door? Nobody, at least me, I don't know, maybe I'm projecting, but as an introvert, I don't want to be greeted at the door. Now, I will say that if you're a woman, it's probably more likely that you will have people coming up to you, especially men, right? That's just life, I feel like, where men tend to be more assertive in social situations in terms of approaching women that they find attractive versus the other way around. So I think that something that I have noticed is that most people who I react to who say what she's saying tend to be women. And I don't think that's a coincidence. But even as a man who probably does not get approached nearly as often as her or any other woman who I've reacted to, it's still incredibly annoying. And look, as a cashier, I'm not gonna lie, I don't really care how your weekend is going. I don't care what plans you have. I just care about ringing you up so we can get through all these customers so I can kind of relax. But that's just me.
It's so weird because when you go in Italy into a store or you order coffee, you just order the coffee. You're not going to chat to someone about your day. I just forgot how chatty people are here. I forgot that you have to tip here all the time for everything. Everything now, people ask you for a tip. And I'm just like, and I forgot also, like when you go somewhere, you buy something and the tax isn't included in the price right away.
So to your point about tipping, it's not just at the sit-down restaurants either. It's at the restaurants where you order at the counter and then they bring your food out to you, and that's the extent of the interaction. And then they'll put the little iPad or the little tablet up and see what percentage you want to tip. And then you feel bad if you say no tip, but it's like, why should I tip you? You're not doing anything. It's like if people at H&M had tipped me for ringing them up at the register. It makes no sense at all. So I don't know why that has become standard, because more often than not, really all the time, those cashiers, they're making more than minimum wage. So there's no real reason to ask for tips. But I don't know, America.
So you don't even know how something will cost until you go check out and they tell you the price like that, plus the tip. It's so expensive and it really adds up. And I just hate having to calculate the tip and decide on the tip. It's like, I miss not having to tip. Will say that I really miss having a bidet.
I'm so glad somebody finally said this. I feel like nobody likes to talk about this, but let's be real. Once you've experienced a bidet, you don't want to go back. You do not want to go back. That's something that I look for in every place we stay in at this point, is if it doesn't have a bidet, I'm not booking it.
I don't understand how I ever survived this long in the US growing up without one, because now I'm so used to having them, and not having them here seems so weird. I genuinely am like, what is wrong with Americans that we don't have bidets? I don't know why. Also, just so much stuff here. Like grocery stores, I went grocery shopping and I felt so overwhelmed. My mom was like, go pick out a peanut butter, go pick out this, and there's so many options. Like the aisles are miles long and there's so many options for one thing, and I forgot, like it makes everything more simple in Italy because you have maybe a few options or just one. Like I get so overwhelmed. I'm really indecisive anyway. So being back here and having just so many options, I'm like, I can't decide. I don't.
That reminds me a lot of my girlfriend. She can be a bit indecisive as well. And rest assured that when we were in those American grocery stores, she was struggling. The worst thing is that sometimes you go to the grocery store, they'll have these long ass aisles with 150,000 different products, but they don't have the one thing that you came there for. It never ever makes sense. At least in the Netherlands with the smaller grocery stores, if they don't have the thing that you came there for, you can justify it by saying, oh, well, they just ran out that day. But in the US, it's like you have all this stuff and you don't have this? Doesn't make any sense at all. But just to double back on the bidet point, because that's something that I'm really, really glad that someone finally brought up. Do they have bidets in your country? Let me know, because if they have bidets in your country, then your country is officially on my list of places to visit.